All right, there you go. Tim Walz, J.D. Vance, the only VP debate that we will see this cycle, and a pretty interesting one. We have a great panel here: Glenn Beck, Sara Gonzales. We've got Steve Deace. We've got Jill Savage. We've got the whole group here. This is going to be a lot of fun today. Glenn, why don't you lead us off? What were your reactions?
I think I just officially met the best vice presidential candidate of my lifetime. I can't think of a vice president that has impressed me in a debate more than him. This guy's, I believe, ready to be president. He shows that Donald Trump is not planning on staying king forever, because Donald Trump didn't pick a sycophant. He didn't pick everything that you would say, that the left would say Donald Trump is going to pick. He picked a successor. He picked someone who can take his 4 years and make it 12 years.
It definitely seems like what the pick meant, and the performance was, I think,
impressive.
A clinic at times. I mean, really impressive from J.D. Vance. I kept coming back to the idea of putting myself in the mold of an MSNBC viewer who has just heard this guy's like humping couches and some weirdo. Imagine seeing that guy. Like, that is totally not the impression you'd get at all if you have an open mind at all. I don't think there's any way you can think Tim Walz.
I don't think there's anybody watching MSNBC.
Well, that's a fair point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I totally agree with Glenn. I think, he was unfazed. He was cool, calm, and collected. He was so different than what the leftist media and Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have been trying to portray him as this entire time, which is not just, as you mentioned, humping couches. Thank you for the imagery.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
I know, that's true. We all have our choices.
I'm going to go out on a limb here.
I'm not shaming. I'm not shaming.
Community.
Yeah.
But I do think that, this was perhaps their first look at J.D. Vance and what he was about, and hearing from him. And I do think that it's going to be very hard for them to continue with this rhetoric that he is some far right-wing radical, that he is, Project 2025. He's a part of it. Him and Donald Trump are going to destroy the country. He was a very reasonable person. He was very personable with Tim Walz. It's going to be very hard for them to continue this rhetoric that he is a far-right extremist now that they've actually heard from him himself.
Jill, what do you think?
Well, they want to go out and say J.D. Vance is weird, right? The far-right rhetoric. No, and to Glenn's point, this is somebody in the vice presidential debate that is actually memorable. What did we have the last time around when Donald Trump was on the top of the ticket? Mike Pence. What were we talking about after the VP debate?
The fly.
The fly. Exactly. How different is this scenario that we're sitting here talking about right now than the fly that landed on Mike Pence's head? Now, I'm not going to go out and say it's a Reagan a time for choosing, which I do have in my car at all times just in case. But it is. It's something that is going to elevate J.D. Vance to a different status where you can't just write him off and say, he's not somebody to be taken seriously. He's not a man of substance. He was speaking to everyday Americans, and that's what we needed to have happen. He didn't wait until the very end for his closing remarks. He did it often early, and he just spoke to the American people.
Steve?
I thought that was the best apologetic for Donald Trump's candidacy, record, policies, ideas the American people have ever heard from anybody, is what I thought. I think if the president is, the former president is smart, that will be the last word. And he will not attempt to finish the job. Let that be the last word the American people hear. And I think, there's some polling from Emerson today, and there's very few public pollsters that I have regard for right now. Emerson is one of the few that I do. And Emerson came out today with a poll of Pennsylvania that showed a clear majority of Pennsylvanians admit that Trump's policies are better for them. And yet their top line result in the state was still a tie. So there was a 7-point gap, which is monstrous, between people who admit that Trump's policies are better for them than who actually is willing to vote for him in terms of the margin. And I think, we could sit here, and I'm getting it from some of my ideological buddies around the country, and I'm usually in this camp. We could have hit him harder there, could have hit him harder here, could have hit him harder there. But the number one thing that J.D. Vance did tonight with his presidential posture, presence, he made Donald Trump something he is not to a majority of the American people. Accessible. And I think that...
And stable.
Yes. And what he did, that entire presentation tonight, the fact he could have... When we were talking, Jill, before the debate, I was concerned he was going to just beat him up too bad. I don't think Tim Walz did that bad at all. He was shaky at the start. I think from a substance standpoint, he even won a couple of rounds. But if I could use a baseball analogy, because my Tigers are in the playoffs, Tim Walz is a solid Bill Buckner, perennial Major League Baseball starting first baseman. What you saw here tonight was Stan Musial, Lou Gehrig, Miguel Cabrera level talent at the same position. I am not comparing Vance to Walz. I'm looking at Vance trying to make a sale to the American people that Donald Trump has consistently struggled to make.
Yes.
He made that sale tonight.
Yes.
He closed that sale tonight. And he made Donald Trump accessible. He made Donald Trump stable. He made Donald Trump safe, reasonable, and some of the things that are that my fellow red meat eaters and dispensers are the most disappointed by tonight is exactly what Vance needed to do. This was an only Nixon could go to China moment where the guy that was the attack dog actually came on the stage and demonstrated presidential maturity and actually called people to something inspirational and to rise above all of the demagoguery. And as much as we need a fight, and we need a trial, most Americans aren't ready for that, guys. They're not. Most Americans just want to believe that it's morning in America again, that it can be, that we can have a return to normalcy, that it's safe again, right. And he provided that tonight.
I think they also want an adult. They want somebody to walk in the room and just say, I'm not playing that game. You can play that game all you want. I'm just not going to play it. Look, let's talk about the actual issues. He looked like an adult, and the first adult I have seen on stage
in a while.
Listen, my first election I could vote in was 1992. That is the best presentation I've ever seen to the American people from a GOP standard bearer since I've been of voting age in a general election national setting.
And I can only go back to Ronald Reagan to say, because my first election was 84. And that was the last time. But I've never seen a vice presidential candidate that good.
I really felt from the very beginning that it looked like Walz was there to win. I did this with Steve earlier. I keep screwing up the names. Vance was there to win. Walz was there to survive. And as I think about that, I think they both accomplished that. I think Vance was the clear winner, and I don't think anyone with an open mind could possibly think that he lost that debate. But Walz didn't sink his campaign. I don't think it was destructive.
If he were a Republican, he would have. That answer on Tiananmen Square was one of the worst answers. That would have been the takeaway. So what was the moment? What was the takeaway tonight? Because that's important. The takeaway, if it were an honest debate, would be that Tiananmen Square. And if you want to play it fair on the other side, maybe the January 6th thing for Walz. You know what I mean?
It was very late in the debate, though.
Right.
Lots of baseball on.
What's going to be the takeaway from this? What's going to be the moment?
I think the takeaway is an overall sentiment.
No. I talk about a sound clip or a picture.
That one moment. Do you want to see this
one moment?
I think it's his opening statement. I think Vance's opening statement, I thought set the tone for the entire evening. Everything we said, he almost quoted verbatim what Matt Peterson and I suggested on our stage before the debate. It was almost like he was had a medium channeled into us.
Well, he's probably a subscriber.
I mean, Matt even texted me, we should be getting paid for this. I mean, it was almost verbatim what we suggested, and that set the tone. I'm going to be inspirational. I'm not going to give you the pugilism you want. All right, I'm not going to give you the one-liner back and forth. That's what you guys want, to remind everybody, isn't Donald Trump an a-hole? That's what you want. I'm not going to give you guys that tonight. And tonight, what J.D. Vance did is he gave that 7-point difference in that Emerson poll in Pennsylvania. He gave those people who know. When Reagan is famous for saying about Barry Goldwater, he's right, you know. Okay, because Goldwater nobody liked his personality either. But that was a different era where it was more tolerable to be that pugilistic than it is now. What he did is he said, you know what, Trump's right, you know. So that 7 points of people in Pennsylvania who told Emerson, Trump is right, but I don't like him. That's the best possible pitch that could have been made to those voters to give them permission to say, you're right, Trump's right.
Can we watch a little of this clip that he was just describing? Here is the opening statement from J.D. Vance.
I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq, and so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again.
I will tell you, I think everyone should go home tonight and stream Hillbilly Elegy. Even if you've watched it already, stream it. That thing should be #1 on Netflix this week because that explains who he is, why he's inspirational, what he believes in. This guy is dirt strong. And when you see, I thought it was going to be, okay. It is a tremendous movie that, when you watch it, would never be made today because of how effective it is in making you go, oh my gosh, this guy's an amazing man.
It's huge Hollywood stars. They would never put Hollywood stars that are that big into a movie about J.D. Vance ever again.
They would never make that movie.
They're just so angry at themselves that they did it right now because it makes him look so good.
Yeah, Stu, to your point about, I agree with you that I think that Tim Walz survived. J.D. Vance clearly won. But I do think it's important to point out the stakes were much higher for J.D. Vance because the president, right? I mean, Donald Trump is how old? 79, 78. Okay, so the stakes are much higher for the vice president who has the president who is unfortunately in his elderly years.
And you wouldn't have a party like the Democrats that say, no, leave him in there because she's worse.
Right.
That's why we didn't hear anything about his, senility.
Right.
This guy, I would feel comfortable with him replacing the president.
And I think that exactly. And I think that America needed to see that. They needed to see that this person was a palatable person because the likelihood of him potentially replacing Donald Trump is unfortunately much higher than the likelihood of Tim Walz somehow rising, to the top with Kamala Harris.
I think the odds of this is going to be controversial. I think the odds of an assassination of Donald Trump have gone down after this for the left. Because this guy would immediately step up, call for calm, say, we're going through the election.
Well, you have to get there to November 5th first.
Yeah.
You have to make it there
Actually,
first.
I know, but
once you get there,
nobody wants him to be don't take Trump out. He's our best shot at winning that or losing. That's what they would say.
I think that if I'm a Democrat, I look at that and I'm scared. Like, I'm scared that this guy's probably, the leader.
That's why they had to call him weird from the very beginning. They saw it before many of us did.
Yeah.
Yes.
They also knew Tim Walz was the weird one. So
that's a 12-year.
They always accuse you of what they are or what they're doing.
Party projection.
All right, remember, FDR was 12 years.
Yeah, there you go.
Plus, can I just say this, if we're going to be controversial, wouldn't it be the most Trump thing ever to win this election? Get vindication, stand up there, give your inaugural address, serve your first 100 days and say, peace out, and just walk. I prove my point. That'd be like the most Trumpian thing ever, wouldn't it? Yes.
All right, I want to go to Liz Wheeler. She's the Blaze TV host of the Liz Wheeler Show. Liz, what'd you think?
All right, first of all, to Glenn's point, when J.D. Vance was announced as Trump's vice presidential running mate, I was standing with Tucker Carlson in the green room at the RNC, and we both just turned and looked at each other and said the exact same thing. We said, assassination insurance. Well done, Donald Trump, for that pick. So I think he did prove that point tonight. Listen, J.D. Vance did something tonight in the debate, which I had advised him to do, which is to use Tim Walz as if nobody's going to remember Tim Walz in 4 years. What I mean by this is think back to Hillary Clinton in 2016. Everyone is always going to remember that campaign. Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, unforgettable in the course of political history. But you think, who was her running mate? Tim Kaine, that weirdo guy. You can barely even recall his face. Nobody knows his name. Nobody cares his name. That's going to be the case for Tim Walz in just a matter of years here. No one's even going to remember who he was. No one's going to care. So J.D. Vance did an incredibly strategically smart thing at the very beginning of this debate, and he didn't make a case against Tim Walz. He made his case against Kamala Harris. J.D. Vance was standing on that stage running the Trump administration versus the Kamala Harris administration, and it was incredibly smart. He simply used Tim Walz as this sort of punching bag to punch and pivot to Kamala Harris's record, to contrast Kamala Harris's record against what President Trump has done in office and what he will do when he is back in the White House. And it worked brilliantly. At the very beginning, I echo what Steve said, that opening statement from J.D. Vance was as good as it gets. Mm-hmm. It was about J.D. Vance, the person, without making it about J.D. Vance, the personality. It made it only about, here's why you can trust me, because I get you. I want to be a fighter for you. It was a masterful debate. It was fun to watch. I think J.D. Vance did better the first half of the debate than he did the second half of the debate. He faltered a bit, and I say this kind of laughingly because my standards for people on debate stage are impossibly high. He faltered somewhat in the second half, and it started with his answer on abortion. That wasn't a misstep. That's the Trump campaign strategy. We've talked about this before. I'm more pro-life than Donald Trump, so I don't agree with that strategic choice they've made to be soft on abortion. I don't think that's right. J.D. Vance lost a little bit of his authority after he made that answer, and he kind of played nice guy a little bit with Tim Walz. I think that undermines the campaign that Donald Trump is running a little bit when he plays nice guy, as if you can just debate like gentlemen in Congress and then go out and have a beer after. You don't really do that when the other side is posing an existential threat to our country. So I do think that was a little bit of a misstep by J.D. Vance. But overall, my takeaway is that J.D. Vance highlighted the issues that are most important to the American voter. That would be the immigration crisis, the economy, and forever wars. If you're trying to recruit undecided voters, those are the three issues to use to try to earn their vote. And J.D. Vance did a very good job highlighting Kamala Harris's failures and highlighting Donald Trump's successes. So they say nobody's going to cast their vote one way or the other based on a vice president. But if they do, then J.D. Vance earned some votes tonight.
So, Liz, let me ask you. It's interesting to me that Trump's strategy is exactly the opposite of every president and vice presidential ticket I've ever seen. The lead in this time is the attack dog, and the vice president is the one, let's play nice, let's be reasonable. You know what I mean? It's usually the president who is, we're going to be reasonable, and the crazy attack dog. It's fascinating that they made that choice, isn't it?
Well, yes and no. It's opposite just because that's the natural personality of both of those two candidates. One of my pet peeves on debate stages is when they try to remake a candidate into some other personality. Like, you wouldn't have Donald Trump go on that stage, for example, and try to present those issues the way that J.D. Vance did.
Correct.
In a utopian world, I might want Donald Trump to do that because I think that's the best strategy for debating. But Donald Trump's personality doesn't lend itself to making a case in that way. J.D. Vance's personality does. So it's good, I think, rightly ordered, to actually acknowledge, okay, this is Donald Trump's strength, so this is how we'll have him behave in the campaign. This is J.D. Vance's strength. This is how we'll have him behave. Versus trying to artificially shoehorn them into some, preconceived notion of what a number one versus a number two should do in a campaign.
Liz, if you are an undecided voter, someone who's just not paying attention to this, maybe never even seen either of these two people before in any depth at all, which is a lot of, millions of people, right, that'll probably watch this tonight. What are your impressions of the two? Specifically, what's your impression of Tim Walz?
Sure. Well, I think actually I'm going to give you my impression of J.D. Vance first. So if I am an undecided voter who really hasn't heard of these two people, I definitely did hear the lies. It's not even a false narrative. The lies that the left was slinging about J.D. Vance, calling him weird. And nothing about J.D. Vance on that stage tonight was weird. I look at J.D. Vance. If I'm an undecided voter who's only heard that he's weird, I'm like, what are you talking about? This guy was very reasonable. He has a very relatable story. He speaks very well. He was rather dignified, in fact. So I think that whether or not undecided voters would admit it, it kind of erased the damage. And I think it was a real damage done by that lie that was calling J.D. Vance weird. So that's the first thing. The second thing is Tim Walz. I mean, what an embarrassment. He was fumbling, bumbling, nervous. And I don't mean nervous like, okay, anybody who goes on a national debate stage is going to have a little bit of nerves that makes you human. No, he was nervous because he was lying, and he was nervous because Kamala Harris lies, and he was nervous about being trapped by those lies, which he was when he was asked about his lie about visiting China during the Tiananmen Square massacre. The reason that he looked like a trapped rat is because that's what he is. He was caught in a lie that was more meaningful than even the moderators understood, or they probably wouldn't have asked him that question. So if I'm an undecided voter, particularly a male voter, I think that I'm highly turned off by Tim Walz's record on all the important issues. He has failed, and it was pretty evident. He displayed his failure on stage tonight.
I can definitely confirm that I am turned off by Tim Walz. So you nailed that one.
Has anybody ever seen a debate where the moderator says, "Oh no, you have more time. Go ahead."
Go ahead, seriously, please continue.
I mean, it was amazing.
Thank you so much, Liz Wheeler. By the way, subscribe to Liz Wheeler's newsletter. It's at lizwheelernewsletter.com, lizwheelernewsletter.com. Liz, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you.
By the way, I should also remind you should subscribe to Blaze TV, blazetv.com. Do that tonight. Get involved. As you might know, the media is not going to lead you down any road of truth or fact or accuracy. You need people pushing back against that, and that's what we try to do at Blaze TV. Glenn started this quite a while ago.
Let me tell you something. I have never been more proud of Blaze TV than I am right now. I mean, we did the real news, or not the real news, but
Blaze News Tonight.
Blaze News Tonight.
He doesn't know the names of the shows, but
I don't know the name of the shows. I don't even know who these people are. But, I mean, we are doing some incredible work, and we've turned a corner. Nobody believes the mainstream media anymore, and we are doing our best to make sure we have the documentaries and the information that you have. And I've never been more proud of my colleagues before to be a part of this group. So,
Thank you.
Well, thank you, man.
Very nice.
Thank you.
We should
except
please,
for you.
Except for us.
Present company excluded. So subscribe to Blaze TV. Please do that. The code FIGHT will get you $40 off right now. So take advantage of that.